My name is Shanira Billups. I am a national certified counselor and licensed professional counselor within the New Haven County. I'm also founder and CEO of Mental Growth Internal Healing LLC. I work with a variety of organizations, and I also had some of them as far as behavioral health services. I'm an active member and board member of the Connecticut BIPOC Wellness Initiative, which is a phenomenal networking opportunity and mostly online, but we are going out. And I also am an educator with Southern Connecticut State University, adjunct professor of psychology.
Great. And Regina?
Hi. Hello, my name is Dr. Regina Wilson, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Connecticut. I own and operate a private practice called Wilson Mental Health Services in Harford County. I have been in private practice for over 20 years. I have a wide variety of experience. I also am EMDR trained, and I am also the vice president of the CT BIPOC Mental Health Wellness and Alliance. Started as an online forum to try and reach people to address mental health issues and also to do some education about various topics. And to date, we've done like 66 forums on various mental health topics that addresses the BIPOC community. So delighted to be here. And I thank you for asking myself and I asked my colleague Shanira to join me in this discussion on the mental health needs of children in urban communities, especially during this, pandemic, because what we are seeing is that there have been an increase in mental health issues among, I think, all children, all people, but specifically among children of color in terms of increases in anxiety, depression, suicide rates, school problems because of the in and out of school, the housing instability contributing to these mental health issues, the lack of food resources available to families, all contributing to the decline or the increase in mental health issues. So I think it's an important topic to talk about.
Sure, because I think a lot of young Black kids right now are really experiencing some tremendous mental health issues because not only do they have to deal with racism, police brutality, police killing neighbors and so forth, but the isolation, seeing that the majority of people or a good percentage of the people who the virus is killing are Black and brown people. So there is really a heavy weight on these young children right now. So what do you think that we should do? How can we help these young people achieve some kind of normalcy here?
Dr. Wilson, if you don't mind, I'll probably try to answer this one.
I already saw you, so please go ahead.
So looking at it from a perspective of dealing with things holistically, definitely with behavioral health, I feel that strongly that when it comes to children, environment is everything. Environment is everything. Not because the environment is going to be the total determination as far as the child's overall development, but it will heavily influence it. When you have a child who is brought into an area that is highly stricken with poverty, violence, crime, dealing with low resources, all these types of factors, when they're in an environment, they're vulnerable because that's where they're kind of put to be raised by whoever it is as a caretaker. Now, if they've been blessed enough with caretakers that are resourceful, that are able to push them to be better, to strive better, that can invest in them, they may turn out better than what their environment says they're predictably to be. However, when you don't have that type of support in your environment that is has much deficit or is poor in nature, unless that child can be removed from there or probably have time in another one that can help them to kind of thrive, they're probably going to be more subject to whatever it is that the conditions around them kind of put them into. Now, other factors can definitely determine whether or not they can deter from that. However, if you're going to restrict them to these types of conditions, it runs high risk.
So one thing I want to say with your statement, the word normalcy. I think Black children didn't have normalcy before the pandemic.
Before the pandemic, I
It came
agree.
further, yeah. I mean, we're talking about kids who, you know, again, and not plugging the CT BIPOC, but that was another reason why we started, was because of the police brutality and the racism that was going on. And we knew with the, you know, the country shut down, people weren't going to have access to things, to talk about it, to learn about it, to be educated on what might be going on. So I don't know what is normal for Black children. So, but what we do know is what parents need to do is pay attention to their children's behaviors, right? Because especially smaller children communicate what's going on with them through their play, through their, and through their actions, right? They don't necessarily have the verbal skills to say, Mommy, right now I'm feeling sad because I can't see my friends, you know, or Mommy, I'm sad because I really want to be in school and I'm not getting this online thing. Because a lot of kids also were you know, there's some kids who have excelled with the virtual, but a lot of kids have not thrived in this. It's very hard because one is they don't have the attention span to sit there, right? For them.
Right.
Sometimes there isn't an adult present, because the reality is these families are on the front line in terms of working at like these jobs, fast food, and grocery stores, right? So they have to weigh, do I go to work or do I sit home and make sure my child is doing work? Well, I have to feed my child, because if I don't feed my child, then my child can't sit there and pay attention. If I don't go to work, I don't have a house, then my child doesn't have a house to sit in to learn. So I think, you know, things have been done to try and help, but these are issues that were already there before, that have only been exacerbated. You know, as Shanira mentioned, the poverty, the violence. I mean, violence in some communities is out of control right now.
Totally out of control.
Definitely.
You know, and
it's scary for adults, let alone kids.
Oh yes.
Yeah, Shanira and I earlier were talking. Shanira, share some stories. You told me a story earlier about.
So the within the New Haven County, like even before the summer really kicked into play, there were already weeks upon weeks in a specific area that shootings were happening on the regular. Clients that I did them the courtesy of actually going to their home and seeing them and their children, and they've expressed how they're afraid to be out. They're like, I'm not bringing my child to a bus stop because I know who's associated with X, Y, and Z as far as what's happening, or they just come home from maybe seeing family members and finding that their vehicles have been shot up, like just missing bullets like this. One child had expressed, Mommy, I'm afraid to die. I don't want to do this. And the exposure to community violence is very real. And they're not to mention, you know, dealing with community violence and then dealing with their own personal family trauma. Some of them dealing with domestic violence from their history and deaths in that sense. It's a lot and it's overwhelming. And the biggest thing that I'm finding as far as a common factor is lack of resources and support from other outside sources that are supposed to be available. Housing, just not answering calls or being present. And it's like a strain even for the workers who are working in these facilities or dealing with state services. As Dr. Wilson mentioned earlier, like, you know, the parents are like, all right, do I get a job? Or do I sit at home with my child? All right, it's possible probably sit at home with the child because they say, you know, oh yeah, well, just get on state assistance or whatever. But then it's like there's backup with that. There's no guarantee of anything. You literally don't know where your next paycheck is going to come from. And you're living from paycheck to paycheck and hoping that you can get a safe enough area to go ahead and manage whatever money it is that's coming into you. the struggle, the common term, the struggle is real. Yeah,
Real.
that's exactly what it
Yeah.
is for them.
And actually, it's my opinion that going on state services and the whole food stamps, getting that monthly check, getting this outside help, I think it also does a lot to affect the mental health of young children because they don't see this, they don't see it coming from their parents, they see it coming from outside sources, which tells me that the way they feel is that it can't come from their parents. They have to seek outside help in order to improve their lives. And let's face it, as you said, a lot of these services are very lacking. And
Yeah.
I know for myself, I just completed a book on domestic violence and child abuse that I'm hoping that I will get published because I grew up in that situation. I know the mental health aspect of growing up like that and trying to overcome something like that. And I know that for me, there just was no help. I had to work all of this out by myself. And that takes a long time when you could be doing other things with your life, but you're battling these mental health issues and
Yeah.
you spend so much time looking over your shoulder that you can't look forward and move forward. But I wanted to find out what.
But I just want to piggyback
Yeah,
on.
sure.
So I will agree, Mr. James, that
Just call me
probably
James.
okay, James,
Yeah.
that when you were a child, that there weren't a lot of resources available, and especially for assistance with domestic violence. There actually are a number of resources to help victims of domestic abuse and programs for kids. What's lacking is the programs available to help the offender.
That's
Right?
correct.
But that's what the real problem is. The problem,
Yes.
if you can treat the offender, then you're going to decrease the violence, and then you're going to decrease kids being affected by and women. So there are programs available, many more programs available now. The other piece I wanted to address is in terms of service for mental health. Again, like I said, I have over 20 plus years, and I remember this when I first came into the field. There weren't a lot of people, I'm gonna say Black people, because there weren't a lot of Black clinicians. And I remember, like, I was a hot commodity. I mean, I would get referrals, and one of my expertise is in child sexual abuse. So me and two other colleagues, I worked with a Mirror Asian woman and a Spanish woman, Cuban, and we were getting all the basically children of color referrals in the Hartford, Manchester area. Those counties, that's where I work from DCF. I mean, that's what I did from 2000 to about 2016, just referrals and everything from there. Right now I do a lot of work with intimate partner violence, and I get a lot of referrals from DCF from women who've been in this situation, and I provide psychoeducation and therapy on that aspect. But there are a lot more, because I think our people tend to be hesitant about therapy because there are a lot of us that look like us. There are a lot more of Black clinicians out there, ranging from LPCs, LCWs, PhDs that are available. I mean, what the problem is that people actually are seeking services, and we are inundated with like we can't even get enough people. And like I've gone from where, like I said, modestly, I'm like, I'm gonna do like 16 a week, and that's ample because I think therapy takes a lot. You give a lot of yourself when you're working with people. You're doing good work. I'm at like 25 cases. That's just been during the pandemic, because the need is so high. But there are resources, and here's another great thing. We were talking about when you talked about the Medicaid piece. I do think parents should talk to kids. You can explain to them, well, right now this is, mommy's not able to work, and so we're going to get some help from the state. But this is not something I plan to rely on, because I think it's important that we learn to take care of ourselves. You have to communicate to kids. The other beautiful thing about Medicaid is the rate that Medicaid pays for mental health is better than any commercial insurance.
Definitely.
So
definitely.
it's, about 5-10 years ago, they were paying nothing, and people were like, no, I'm not taking Medicaid. Most clinicians now take Medicaid over commercial insurance.
I think that, and Dr. Wilson, I definitely agree with in terms of Medicaid and the availability of help. And even though like the state, they have certain guidelines or whatever. But the thing is that it's like much easier with state because they understand. I feel they understand the implication that the way the environment has caused strain for so many families who are trying to struggle and finding the balance. It's just being able to address their behavioral health is everything, because stress, even though it has physical and mental impact. So when a person finds himself in extra strain, what happens is different systems, the body's nervous system, we have a few nervous systems. So what happens is, specifically with the peripheral nervous system, it does a lot of the involuntary services like helping out your organs. So imagine if things were to go out of whack with that. If you're stressing, you got all these
Right.
extra hormones being released. You can't balance yourself as far as eating and drinking or doing what you got to do. And then that impacts what your body does when you're not controlling it. We have voluntary muscle movements, but then in the involuntary, that's what you got to worry about, because then your system shuts down on you because all that strain and stress, and you're not taking care of self. So Medicaid covering is everything. As far as the parents discussing things with the children, so even personal disclosure, my parents, they dealt with state stuff when I was younger. I never knew about that. There's certain things that, you disclose to the kids, especially now with parents being so much strained, some stuff you just can't help but to reveal to the kids. So it's like,
Right.
okay, how do I have that conversation? I know when I was younger, again, it's not as bad as it was as it is now. But I didn't know that my parents had certain, I didn't know about food stamps until I got older. I'm like, food stamps, what's that? Like, I learned about it when I started
Oh,
getting into more wanting to do helps and such. But
but
nowadays, especially, I think that kids should have some knowledge of it because it's out there. It's just
Right.
out there.
yeah,
But it's like,
but
how do we communicate that with our kids?
Well, I
Shanir,
want
you
to
brought
go.
a valid, Shanir, you brought a valid point up, and also I think it's important that when you talk to children about things, you talk in an age appropriate level. Like
Exactly.
kids should not be aware of what you are stressing about, because they're
Yes.
going to take it on,
They
and
can
they're going to get a
think
sense
about
of helplessness because they don't have the
Mhm.
power to fix the situation,
it. Right.
right?
Yep.
And so
Hmm.
you just it's kind of not fair to the parent, but the parent can also then seek out support from family, friends, whatever their support system, because they want to make sure they have a support system to connect with, so that they can have people talk to manage their stress. But you, with the kids, you really your goal is to really help them be a kid as much as you can in this insane world that we got going on.
Yes,
Hmm.
I often tell people when I'm talking to them, a kid only wants to know the playground. That's where a
Amen to
kid's
that.
head is in the playground. It's where my head was at. It shouldn't have been anywhere else. I shouldn't have had to worry about problems and adult problems that I had no clue on how to
Hmm.
solve. I just knew that it made me feel guilty that I was not able to help. But I want to go back to something that you said, and that is that there are no programs for the offenders. And
No,
Hmm.
that's
I didn't say. Wait, I didn't say there are. No, there are,
well,
as compared to what's available for victims and
right,
children. I mean, like the women and children,
It's not
they
enough.
far exceed these programs are far greater than what's available for men.
right. So, and I'm wondering why, if men are the perpetrators, why isn't there help available to help the offenders? It just seems kind of illogical that we're not getting to the root of the problem, which is men. And I'm not sure why these men feel the need. I don't know why my father felt the need to beat my mother. I don't know why men feel it's necessary to beat their wives, to beat their children. And some of these men are totally out of control. I mean, they shoot and kill, stab,
If I can speak,
dismember.
if I
Pardon
can
me?
speak candidly about this, if I
Yes.
can speak a little candid about this,
Yes, I want you to
it's
speak
a
as candidly as
systems
possible.
issue. It's a systems issue. From the
Right.
beginning of time, we've known that this system was not built for Black people
No.
or people of color.
Right.
A person offends, you throw them in jail if it's rough enough. It's just a matter of the degree of the offense. Then what happens is they go into these jails, the punitive system, and the hope is that they're enlightened enough to realize that these people, they have a high chance of becoming repeat offenders unless a program is put in place to actually address it. And then there'd be programs that are in place sometimes within the jail system. But what happens is sometimes they're not aware of it because of the prejudice, the bias issues that happen within the jail system. where they're not being notified. So unless a person goes in there somewhat knowledgeable and decides, you know what, I want to make better of myself to go and handle my business, it's like they're just going to go and leave broken just as much. They're just waiting for the time to be over. And what they learn to do is be sneaky. Now, then you got with behavioral health issues, dealing with the emotional distress, checking out an offender's background. Like sometimes, yeah, you get those who just do it for no reason and they're vindictive. And then you got those who actually have a trauma history themselves and never knew how to actually handle it. But nobody asks questions, or rather, people do ask questions. But as Dr. Wilson was stating, the amount of support is not as much as for those who have who has gotten the brunt end of it. Now, dollars drive decisions, so it's whatever is also going to bring money to systems as far as keeping them thriving. So it's like, all right, if we want to propose an idea that's going to be a little bit more on the outskirts, or really show that, hey, listen, stuff works, they're going to look for evidence-based kind of things in order for the government or whoever it is that is wanting to give to say, all right, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and put in. But that's where you also get grants and whatever, and you're hoping for a person who sees like, okay, this is a need, is going to be able to provide this money. But the thing is that a lot of the offenders that we're finding, a high amount of them end up being people of color. And when we're always dealing with some kind of poverty or poor background, or not getting a lot of support from these other entities, it's like, what in the world? But go to other programs that are supported, I'm just going to speak candid, by white or by the majority, they get money like that.
Like that.
And it's like,
yes.
because of the red tape that has been put in place for a lot of our people, and we're trying to build back up as we become more knowledgeable. But we have to be able to support our own. I think that is really coming from that too.
So here's I agree with most of what you're saying. I do believe it's a system issue, but the system issue is driven by patriarchy. So the reason why there aren't laws, better laws, and more help available to treat the offender is because it is a male-driven society. And so men, that means it's like you have to look at yourself.
I hear you.
You know what I'm saying? You have to recognize that it's like when there's someone who did something like here's another example. When there's a crime committed on the news, right? I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I'll be like, please don't let it be a black person. Please don't let it be black.
I'm the same way. Lord, don't let it be one of us, Jesus.
Well, because again, then we're all guilty by association. A man having to put laws down for other men does not make you good, but that's, I think, the thinking like that. So that's part of the problem. It's a patriarchy society with system issues that aren't addressing the issue. The other thing that you have said is why, when you were asking why did your father want to be his mother? I guarantee you, if you go back and look at your father's life, it was modeled for him somewhere along the way. Because like, this is my simple expression. I say, nobody grows up and says, I want to be an abuser, right? A lot of the stuff we learned, what Shanira was saying, people have their own unresolved trauma. You know, people have their own ways that they learn to deal with anger, right? So if you're in a home where anger is modeled, that you don't talk about it, you act out in it, well, this is the way you're going to cope with things. Or you grow up in a home, this is another reason why there's abuse. You grow up in a home in which there's a lot of jealousy and cheating. Now you're insecure and you got trust issues. And the minute she's looking at her phone longer than 5 minutes, you're reacting based on your triggers that she's doing something wrong. And so now, and you have these poor anger management skills, or you witness your parent abusing your mother this way. So it is a natural way for you to do it. We learn through modeling until we're taught differently, right? Yes. And the other piece is the reason why I think there's more Black men that come to the system is because they don't have the resources, right? Again, there's more protection for white men.
Yes, there is.
White men abuse too, but they have greater protection. Like they tend to get the one where like, oh, it's a one-time only thing. You know, this is not his nature. Where, you know, Black men are defined as animalistic,
right,
dangerous, violent. So of course you did this. There's you don't get the same amount of you don't get a pass like other groups do.
Yes, I noticed that when I was seeking help, I would go to talk to a psychiatrist. I'm a veteran, so I got my services at the VA. But I noticed that you know, the way they approached me was immediately put me on the defensive, because the first thing was, what's your problem? You know, and they're not listening to me. They're actually, and this is a true story, they actually are opening up their mail and reading their mail while they're trying to get me to explain why I've come to see them. And I think probably on an average 10 minutes before a prescription was written, you know, for me to, you know, have you tried this? Oh, well, try this, you know, and oh, if that's not helping, maybe we need to add this. And I was actually on that roller coaster for quite a few years before my family just said, look, I don't get, it's not working. It's making you worse. You know, leave the medication alone and let's find another way. And that is actually, truthfully, is what helped me when I got rid of the psychiatrist, when I got rid of the medication and so forth. Then I began to actually improve. And I know that's a sad commentary, but that is the truth. That's when I started to improve. And so I've really been big on this, that when it comes to being a Black man, somehow or another, we're not seen as having emotional problems, mental health issues, and so forth. It's almost like we're expected to deal with this on our own. So,
well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, well, I have to say that that is just generally society's perspective. It's slowly changing. However, it's a sad thing that's kind of deeply rooted. Like, even as Dr. Wilson's talking about, like, you know, something pops up on the news, violence related or whatever, it's like, oh, Lord Jesus, don't let it be another Black person. But it's like, that's just something that we've culturally been exposed to. But it's all about breaking cycles, breaking chains. I like to think about it this way. Women, in terms of the nature, we tend to have more of an approach that we can display our emotions much more frequent, and probably be more comforted in the fact that society might be more accepting of that because that's what they're used to. But as far as being emotional, I feel that men can be very much more emotional than women can. It's just the stifling sometimes that I've witnessed from clients and from generally, like, even relatives or whatever, is very real. But because of, like, restricting to do that because of what's expected from being a man. But if you get a man emotionally, it goes all the way. Right. I've seen it where men have broken down, but it's like, I feel that it's unaddressed kind of trauma or things, changes that they haven't been able to really disclose, especially our Black men. It's like being able to feel okay with, at the end of the day, I still am who I am, but right now I need to take care of this in order to be a stronger person. I like to tell my clients all the time, and those who I associate with,
but I think
not crying doesn't make you strong, but basically when you're able to display emotions and be within your truth, that's what makes you a strong person.
But I think a lot of, we're running out of time here. This is something I've never had. So
I just want to say one thing.
Let me get this. If we run out of time and we still want to talk, I'll just email you back. But
definitely,
I did want to say that that I think for a lot of men, and particularly Black men, getting help or seeking mental health services makes you feel weak. And I think that I wonder how much of a problem that is that you feel so weak when you break down, when you cry, because men are, you know, we're taught at a very young age, stop crying, you're a boy. Boys don't cry, you know, that kind of thing. And so you grow up, you know, and you bottle all this inside and you feel embarrassed when your emotions, when you're talking about something that has really harmed you, and you break down. Your first reaction is, I'm sorry, and you immediately close up again. So I don't know if that's been your experience.
It is, and what I was actually going to say, which you spoke to, is I think we have to start normalizing that it's okay for Black men to feel. You know, they have been 100%. Conditioned. They have been, you know. So there's a conditioning piece there also. This, you know, it stems back to slavery. You couldn't show emotions. You had to be strong. You had to be tough. And so then you have this condition that goes on. It's almost even part of our male genetic natures not to share. You have to wear that mask. You have to be tough. You have to be strong and not show your vulnerabilities, because if you do, it's a weakness for someone to get you. But we have to change that. We have to normalize. We want you to share your feelings. We want you to get that stuff out, because if you don't get out that stuff that you're holding in there, it's coming out some other way, whether it's through beating up someone, whether it's through drugs, whether it's going the pipeline of incarceration. It has to come out somewhere.
Yes,
Now,
I agree
I want to go
100%.
back to the pandemic and children in education, because I've read a recent report that says that the pandemic has thrown Black children 2 years behind in terms of education. Do you agree with that?
Can't necessarily say, as even as an educator, that it's for in terms of children, that it puts them 2 years behind. I'm sure that there are studies that are showing that there's a deficit because of the pandemic, because children having to stay at home, parents and families just trying to figure out how to work technology, having access to technology, kids being behind because of people not showing up in terms of the meetings, or the children being in a home where there might be domestic violence going on, or whatever is happening, where it's not that organized, folks just not showing up and attendance being stifled. Yeah, so that right there might be some truth to it as far as the specifics. Not sure. It could be well more than that. It could be a little under that, but it is definite that children have tend to be behind because of the pandemic.
And
Yeah,
I also understand that the suicide rate among young Blacks, and I believe it's I don't want to children aged 10 to 19, and the suicide rate has risen some 73% in that age group. I just find that astonishing. And
well, I think what we're seeing again is tied into the depression.
Yes.
Basically, children rely on each other for socialization, and we've had to isolate. I mean, I've literally had to identify, because I live alone, safe friends that I know aren't going out there, being wearing a mask, possibly being vaccinated, but being safe, so that I can get that social connection. Children rely on that far greater than we do. So now
right,
you have them. Imagine if you're an only child, right?
right.
It's just, and with a single mother. So now your mom's got to go to work, or she's stressing about these other things. She's not telling you, but something's not right, because she's just not as talkative, or this and this, or she's walking around worrying. So you're only child. There's only so much of, and you don't, your internet's acting up. So now you can't connect with friends through FaceTime or Facebook, or through Snapchat, or through any type of text messaging. It's the isolation piece. It's the lack of the sports, being able to do activities. It's the lack of just going out, being a kid, having fun, and then, for, I think, some kids also, because they're in that age where you have a little more understanding of what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
It's not a happy place right now on many
No,
levels.
it's not.
So, they're internalizing all this stuff that they may not have the coping skills to handle. And so you have, I don't believe kids, when they do this, they actually know what they're really doing. They're looking for a way for all this to stop, and suicide becomes an option. But I really, ultimately, cognitive, emotionally, they don't know what they're doing. It's just something that they've heard about. I think more so a lot of suicide also is from, they've heard about a friend doing it, and then now this is being copied because they have all these intense feelings.
From experience that has happened, where I've talked to youth who have had self-harm behaviors or suicidal ideation, and they've talked about how they've either tried it because they just heard somebody else kind of do that and it seemed to be helpful for them, or they've heard it from somewhere on TV or whatever it is, and they're in a place where they're super vulnerable. Now, as far as the cognitive piece, research shows that, developmentally speaking, that frontal area is not the place that has much more with the neurally, in terms of the reasoning, understanding, problem solving, things like that, is not fully grown until the youth is well into their 20s. The problem is that the youth at an exponential rate are being exposed to, again, we talked about environment and the difference that it makes. They're exposed to these environments that are extremely triggering, the lack of support thereof within it. Not to say the support doesn't exist, but it's a matter of the support being available. The
Available.
availability is at a
Right.
huge
Accessibility,
deficit.
access. That's really what it's about.
Exactly, access,
So
everything.
what can we do? What can parents do to help their kids if they find that their kids are, you mentioned that sometimes parents don't see the signs, or parents need to see the signs. What are some of the signs parents should look for?
So one of the things I tell one of the things I tell my parents is, you are the expert on your child's behavior. Anything your child stops doing differently, that's a sign, right? So if you're used to your child, maybe well, you know, he plays on his game for, you know, a couple hours, or you know, he got his favorite TV show. If your child stops playing on the games, not watching it, no longer expressing an interest in the TV show, that's a sign, because he's doing these things. So it's like, you know, not doing things like before, walking around more sad, more withdrawn. Some people might even see bedwetting, right? They didn't do it before, or maybe they did it before and now it's returned. You might see decreased appetite, difficulty focusing or concentrating. What I'm talking about, these are all the traditional signs of depression that you can look for. You know, to me, responsible parenting is, you know, you sit down at the table. Like, you shouldn't be having the phone shouldn't be there. There shouldn't be people watch TV with while eating. You should sit down and, how was your day? How have you been feeling? You know, checking in with your child daily, especially right now during the pandemic.